Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, today is the third Saturday of the month, so it's time for us to debut a brand new show broadcasting all the way from India. It's called Saturdays with SHARAN, and SHARAN stands for Sanctuary for Health and Reconnection to Animals and Nature. And it's hosted by Dr. Nandita Shah. Please welcome her to the show. I'm so excited to have an international guest.
Oh, Chef AJ, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to start with my story a little bit. I've been here before, and so I've said some of the things, but this is going to be completely different because Saturdays with SHARAN is going to be about health. So we are going to take different health topics, which I'll talk more about later. But right now, I just want to talk about why SHARAN and what it's all about and why we're doing this. So I became vegan actually for ethical reasons. And when I first became vegan, I wasn't 100% vegan because I was still eating things cooked in butter or ghee. And I thought that I was doing all the good things until it really hit me that I'm still allowing a bit of dairy in my diet. And when I became 100% vegan, I got an amazing kind of clarity. And I just felt like I wanted everyone to know about it. So I started telling people, and nobody was so excited. And I just thought that I want to do something for the animals because the animals have been tortured so much by human beings. And I thought of opening a sanctuary for farmed animals in India, which had never been done before in India because there was hardly anyone who was vegan at that time. Nobody knew much about veganism. And I was telling my friend about it, and while I was telling her, she was Googling farm sanctuary and found one in upstate New York. So within a few months, I was doing an internship at Farm Sanctuary in New York. And after that, I also visited the California Farm Sanctuary, and it was such an inspiration. And I came back and I wanted to buy land. And I found a beautiful piece of land, but it slipped through my hands. And it was something that I could afford, but then it didn't work out. And it was really a large piece of land on a river. It was just beautiful. And then another friend told me that you shouldn't start a farm sanctuary. That really pissed me off. But I was listening to her, and she said that you should use your skills to do something that you want to do. And so I thought about it and I said, yes, I'm a doctor. And how could I use this? And by that time, I had already seen huge benefits in my health. And I had already started telling patients about um, how plant based food could help them in their health. And my patients weren't really listening to me, except for those who had one foot in the grave and they were willing to do everything and they started getting better. Nobody expected them to get better, but they got better. So I had really severe cases getting better and lots of patients all around me who had nothing much and weren't willing to change. So I was thinking, how can I help them change? And so I started giving these day-long workshops called Peas versus Pills. And I got that name from something that John McDougall had written on his website to promote his talks. You know, he said, have you ever considered peas versus pills and oatmeal versus obesity or whatever? He had a few phrases like that. And so I named my workshops Peas versus Pills. And I made sure that they were with me for an entire day. So I served breakfast and lunch and a heavy snack before they left. They left at around 5 o'clock. And so those workshops became so popular, and they became popular because of the food. Like the food was better than any food you could get around here at that time. So people came, and I saw that people were changing, and the reason they were changing, they were listening to me, but I had already started doing talks, free talks all over the place, and they would listen and they would be enthusiastic, but they would go out and they wouldn't follow what I was saying. But when I served the food, then people were saying, I could do it, this could be good. And I saw people changing. And so over a period of time, I used my skills as a doctor, and I also was a good cook. So I used my skills as a doctor and a cook, and I, inspired people to follow this path. And then I thought that, how am I going to spread this? And so I started doing training programs for people to become vegan entrepreneurs. So that, people who had done my one-day seminar and wanted to spread the message, I was trying to teach them how they could use their skill set to spread veganism, because I thought every single skill set could be good to spread veganism. And then this slowly evolved, and I started doing training programs for doctors and nutritionists, as well as facilitator training programs, so that people could give good cooking classes, and so that's how SHARAN evolved. Also, the main point is that, I was interested in animals, but I also thought that if we're talking about animals, we have to look at the environment, because I felt that when we're building all over the place and cutting down all the trees, then where can the animals possibly go? So I knew that, animals, health, environment were totally connected. And SHARAN, the word SHARAN means sanctuary. It's actually a Sanskrit or Hindi word, and it means refuge or sanctuary. So I thought it was a really nice name, and it was kind of given to me. Like, I realized that I was kind of being led to do certain things. Like the farm that I didn't get, that was also for a reason, because I had to use the skills that I had, and I had no skills in farming and looking after animals. So I had to use the skills I had in order to spread this message. So now I'm going to share my screen, if I may.
That is such a great story. How long did you spend at in the United States working at the farm sanctuaries?
I did a 1-month internship in farm sanctuary. At that time, I was already kind of going to the United States every year, or maybe twice a year, to teach, because I was teaching homeopathy. I'm a homeopath. And the reason I became a homeopath, I'm a registered medical doctor, but the reason I became a homeopath was because I wanted to treat holistically, and I wanted to connect mind, body, and spirit. And that was also something that led me to follow plant-based nutrition for health. I read Dean Ornish's book, and right in the beginning, he wrote, this is about healing mind, body, and spirit. And that resonated with me, because that's why I was doing homeopathy. And so I read the book, and I thought, this is what I should do with my patients. And that's how I started out.
Great.
So now we do, now SHARAN, it has grown a lot. We only let people in who have benefited from a whole plant-based diet, who are practicing it very in a as purely as possible, really whole plant-based. Nobody's 100% pure, because we all go out and eat once in a while, but as purely as possible. Everyone is completely plant-based, and once in a while they might have something with oil or sugar. It happens, or white rice or something, but everyone's completely plant-based and very passionate about spreading this, because they've seen enormous health benefits. And so I thought that I would bring this to Saturdays with SHARAN. So that's my story about SHARAN and why we put together Saturdays with SHARAN. And so today I'm going to be talking about the basic principles of healing that we use at SHARAN. But in the next episodes, we're going to be talking about different kinds of diseases. Like the next month is about autoimmune diseases, and then maybe cancers and acidity and diabetes and heart disease and hypertension and infertility and depression and irritable bowel syndrome and vitamin B12 and D deficiencies. And these are just some that we've started with. So, we have people who are our facilitators who have healed from some of these. So they'll be with me in the future shows. Today I'm alone, but they'll be with me in the future shows, and they're going to be telling their stories of how they healed from these diseases. And then they're also going to share some recipes, some of them who are cooking instructors. So that we'll have some learning and some fun, and that's what I thought. I hope that sounds good to you.
That sounds great because, people love Indian food, but it's so hard, at least in restaurants, to find it oil-free.
Okay, so we'll have more of Indian food. You know what? The next episode is not a lot of Indian food, and that's because all three of the people who have healed themselves from autoimmune disease are gluten-free and largely raw. And so, there's simple raw recipes, but after that, we'll try to include a lot more Indian food.
Fantastic. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, so today's program, we're going to talk about lifestyle diseases that we face today. And today lifestyle diseases are just soaring. And then we'll talk about what are SHARAN's principles of healing and the logic of nutrition as a medicine. I'm a doctor and a scientist, and so I can't do something unless it's totally logical and scientific. And so I want to talk about that. And then how our body always works to heal, and the causes of disease, the way I see it, diseases in general, and how to make a meal plan if you're following SHARAN's principles. So this is the idea for today. So today we have so many lifestyle diseases, and if you think about it, lifestyle diseases are caused by lifestyle. And so we should be changing our lifestyle so as to get rid of all these diseases. But we live in a culture of disease, obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease and cancers and chronic kidney disease and autoimmune disorders and asthma and upper respiratory tract infections. And these are patients that I see every single day. And it wasn't like that before. I have a feeling that I'm seeing more and more difficult cases like cancers and autoimmune diseases and chronic kidney disease that were much less common before than they are now. And do you find this in the US as well?
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's why, I think that we're adopting American lifestyle. And so we're getting all these diseases. And so I thought that you must be having them. So it's a good thing to speak about. So here, and probably in the US too, people look out for toxic pills and surgery as a solution to this in today's culture. And very few are like our audience today who are really interested in lifestyle change. And that's why I so appreciate what you're doing, Chef AJ, because you have so many people listening to these episodes where people are talking about lifestyle changes, how to cook healthy, and actually taking care of their health. But the majority of the people are still going to hospitals and going for medication, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And so I said that I'd like to talk about the logic of nutrition as a medicine, and I'm sure that most of the people here know about this. So I'm going to go really quickly on this. But I like to say that, every single animal eats according to instincts and according to its species. So if you had a cow, it would probably eat grass. And if you have a lion, it's going to eat another animal, its prey, maybe deer or gazelles or whatever. But when it comes to humans, we have been taught that we're omnivores. And we never really think about our instincts at all, right? Because it's all culture, the culture of killing and violence and eating animal products. But if we think about it instinctively, if we were on a farm or an orchard and we see fruits and vegetables, instinctively we feel like picking them and eating them. But if you see a chicken walk by, or a cow, or a goat, our mouth doesn't water. It's not our food. And we can't, pounce on these animals and tear them apart and eat them raw like a true omnivore could, but we still think we're omnivores, right? Or a true carnivore could, or a true omnivore could. We can't. So who would salivate if they saw a chicken walk by? Probably a fox or a dog. So realistically, chicken is dog food. But if someone sees a plate like this, they may, obviously not the vegans you have on your show, but if someone sees a plate like this, they may be tempted. And that's just because of conditioning. Also, if we see green fields of wheat and rice, our mouth doesn't water, and that's because we can't eat these raw. We have to cook them, but all the animals on the planet eat their food raw. And so, this is probably food for cows, or the seeds are food for birds, but it's not our food. So logically, we know that, and instinctively, we know that the foods best for us are the ones that we feel like eating when we see them raw. We feel like just picking them on a farm and eating them. And if we look at the dentition of carnivores and herbivores and even omnivores, and then look at our own teeth, it's very clear that we aren't the omnivores that we thought we were. And here in India, we have a lot of vegetarians and non-vegetarians get exactly the same diseases. And that's because meat and milk have the same properties: high protein, high fat, and no fiber. And when I say milk, I have to really specify in India, because India is such a milk consuming culture that milk means anything that's made from milk, or anything that has milk as an ingredient is going to cause disease, just the way meat does. And if you think about it, every single mammal produces milk only for their young, and we are not cows. And that's why every single baby is totally attached to their mother's milk, but when they're first given cow's milk, they don't appreciate it, right? And then mothers add cocoa and sugar and all kinds of things to the milk to put it down their children's throats. So we're actually being manipulated by advertising. We're being manipulated by a culture that wants to sell, a commercial culture. And so I always say that if you want to know what to eat and what not to eat, look at all the things that are advertised and don't eat that. That means, because people are not going to spend money advertising things that are in our instincts. They might say there's a sale of oranges or apples, but otherwise you never see advertisements on TV for apples or oranges, or even in magazines. But you definitely see advertisements for eggs and milk and meat and so on, and even wheat. so these things are not our food. And so if we were to go closer to the foods that are really meant for us, nobody will advertise them because advertisement costs money. And it's already, we're already wired to appreciate foods that are meant for us. So nobody needs to advertise them. So we have to really eat foods, or much more of the foods that we're instinctively attracted to. And the second point is whole. All the animals on the planet eat their food whole, and they get sick much less than we do. Therefore, we should eat our food whole as well. But the real reason that we should eat our food whole is because the maximum nutrition of anything is just under the skin. So if you take off the skin, you're losing too much nutrition. Like if you just take out the outer skin of wheat and make it white flour, you're losing more than 50% of the nutrition. So it's really, the nutrients are what heal. Nutrients are the spare parts for healing, and therefore we want high nutrient foods. And, we all know that if you've ever eaten brown rice, then if you compare it to the amount you would eat if you were eating white rice, you can eat much more white rice than brown rice. So when the fiber is intact, we eat less, which is always good for us, and we eat higher nutrient dense food. So it's always good for us. So we really need to eat as much whole as possible. So whole foods means eat like a monkey, because, we are primates after all. So eat like a monkey means eat that part of the food that a monkey would eat. Peel your bananas, but not your apples or pears or peaches or whatever. And the third important principle is that eat organic, because imagine if you have to put all this gear on to spray poison on food, then why would you eat the food that's been sprayed with poison, right? Or else, nowadays humans don't do it. We have machines to do it because it's so toxic. So we should avoid eating foods that we are toxifying. So I always recommend 100% organic foods, so that we have high quality spare parts so that we can heal diseases. And also we're instinctively attracted to colors. And that's why manufacturers also use colors to attract us. But we should remember that, like, very few animals see all the colors of the rainbow, but we do, just so that we can pick foods that are of all the colors of the rainbow. And when we see colors, all the colors, we are attracted, and we are also, each color has different nutrients. So it's really important. So a summary of what we recommend is eating as close to nature's design as possible. Eating plant-based foods, obviously, because we can't eat animal-based foods raw, and we can't eat them whole. And then eat whole foods like all the other animals. And it doesn't make sense to eat foods sprayed with pesticides. The reason we're spraying pesticides is so that other animals don't eat it, and other animals are smart enough, but we're not there to see the chemicals, so sometimes we eat it. So we shouldn't. And then, of course, just like all the animals on the planet eat their food raw, we should eat more raw food, and we should avoid all addictive substances like tea and coffee and alcohol, even though they come from the plant kingdom, or tobacco, whatever, drugs like cannabis. So these are the basic principles that we use. And we always say the body always works to heal. So we just need to do what nature expected. And this helps us answer so many questions that I'm going to bring up just now. So we need to just think about how can we go as close to the expectation that nature had of us as possible, so that we can do it in a sustainable way, so that it will be maintained lifelong. Because a lot of people say, okay, I'm going to go completely raw. And then they do it. And then after a while, they're eating everything. So it's not possible to change everything perhaps overnight, but we have to keep these principles in our mind. We need to keep going closer and closer to what nature expected. And if you can think about this logically, then many questions could be answered. Like, for example, people like to ask, how will I get enough protein on this lifestyle? And if we think about this logically, like what did nature expect, then we would say, hey, elephants get enough protein being herbivores. Cows get enough protein being herbivores, and so do horses, and they have a lot of muscle power as well. So why would we need anything more than a horse to be healthy, right? We don't need more protein. In fact, as I'll tell you later, one of the causes of lifestyle diseases is too much protein. And now we're in a culture where we worship protein and we think that we should have as much protein as we possibly can. But too much protein causes more diseases today than less protein. Because if I were to ask you, do you know anyone with protein deficiency? You'd probably say no, right?
I don't know anyone.
Yeah, that's the point. Nobody knows anybody. There are people who have protein deficiency, and protein deficiency even has a name. It's called kwashiorkor. But very few people think about this, and probably less even in the United States, because protein deficiency occurs in malnutrition, or rather starvation. And starvation, so it happens in countries like India when people don't get any food. But if you are on a full stomach, if you have enough food, then protein deficiency is extremely rare. Then there's another question, should I eat honey? And if you think about nature, if you're looking at a beehive, would you salivate? Not really. So honey is not our food. It's just sold in supermarkets and marketed well, and there are advertisements for it. And so we eat honey. But nobody would be, getting their own honey on a day-to-day basis, right?
They'd get stung.
For example,
They'd get stung.
Or for example, people are, how much water should I drink and when? And a lot of people think that they shouldn't drink water right after a meal or during a meal. And if you look at all the animals, I always watch animals to figure out what we should do. And if you look at all the animals, they usually drink right after eating, right? So I think that instead of figuring out or reading books or listening to others about when we should drink or how much we should drink, we should really listen to our body, because our body knows us much better than anyone else, right? So the body will never make a mistake. Nature will never make a mistake, but we can make mistakes, and people can make mistakes, and people can write mistakes in books as well. But we should be always turning back to our body and thinking, what did nature expect us to do? Or if you think of this question, is wheat good for me? And so many people have gluten intolerance, but anyway, none of us can eat wheat raw. So there is a chance that wheat is not our food and therefore it's not good for us. So if you have that question in your mind, it would be worthwhile at least trying a period without any wheat and seeing if it's beneficial, or, without gluten. Or isn't milk a complete food is another question that I'm often asked, and especially in India, because India is such a dairy dependent country. Did you know that India has the maximum number of cows in the world and produces, it's one of the largest producers of milk in the world. I'm not sure if it's the largest, but one of the largest producers, one of the largest exporters of beef, and one of the largest producers of leather. So we are a very dairy dependent society. And we believe that milk is a perfect food. Milk is a perfect food, but milk is the perfect food that any mammal produces for her baby only. And since we're not calves, it's not our perfect food. Isn't getting organic foods is getting organic foods totally necessary? That's what a lot of people ask me. And we're going to go into this in a little more detail soon. But organic should not even be called organic because it's natural. But the other food should be called chemical foods. And if they were really called chemical foods that they are, or toxic foods that they are, then we wouldn't be eating so much of them. But now we have to put a special label on the foods that are grown naturally, just so that we know that they're organic or safe to eat. So I think it's really important to eat organic as much as possible. Then there's another question. Why does SHARAN recommend only 10 nuts a day? And that's because, well, 10 nuts are on the high side, but we are leaving it at 10 because, we use nuts for so many things that people need in the transition. We use nut milks and nut cheese, and, also use it as a base for dressing sometimes and desserts. So it's hard to say no nuts, especially to someone who's transitioning. But if you think about nuts, they're really hard for us humans to get into. Like walnuts, if you had walnuts, they're the easiest. But if you, this is hard to talk about because many people haven't seen nuts whole, since nuts are always sold shelled these days. But if you see nuts, they come in really hard shells. They're really difficult to open and almost impossible without tools, which means that they're not our food. And so we should minimize them. And also, so many people have nut allergies. That's just because nuts aren't really our food. Now, I should say that peanuts are not nuts. Peanuts are legumes. They're from the pea family. And so peanuts are really easy to open. And so peanuts can be had in a little more quantity. And I do know that a lot of people are allergic to peanuts in the US. It's totally different here in India. Very few people are allergic to peanuts. And I think it's because our peanuts look totally different from the peanuts in the US. Maybe American peanuts are genetically modified, or I don't know what. But very few people are allergic to peanuts here in India. And so we do use more peanuts, but not a lot of tree nuts. Are supplements necessary? I'm actually against supplements in general, and I do recommend vitamins B12 and D because almost everyone is low on them, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later. But in general, supplements should not be necessary because if we eat high quality, whole plant-based organic food, we should get all the nutrients that nature meant us to get. The reason we have vitamin D deficiencies is because people are not spending enough time out in the sun, and you can't get vitamin D through sunlight if you live in a very polluted environment. And in India, all the big cities are highly polluted. So even if you spend the whole day out in the sun, your vitamin D levels won't go up. And vitamin B12 is made by bacteria. And since we are all living a super hygienic lifestyle nowadays, many people don't get enough vitamin B12. And that's why these supplements are necessary. But I usually don't prescribe omega-3 or vitamin C or anything else, because I believe that you can get all of this through the food. Then there's a question, is intermittent fasting good? And these are questions that many of my patients ask me. Intermittent fasting is a fad these days, kind of. But if you think about it, intermittent fasting means not eating for 14 or 16 hours in a day and eating only 8 to 10 hours in a day. And if we were living in nature, you can't eat before sunrise and you can't eat after sunset. And that's kind of intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting is something that nature expected us to do. And so it's probably good. And a lot of people feel better intermittent fasting. But many people think that, oh, intermittent fasting means that you shouldn't eat till 12 and then you can eat for 8 hours until 8 at night. But I would say that intermittent fasting means don't start eating until you're really hungry, and eat before sunset, or eat early and then don't eat all night long. That's what I would consider as an intermittent fasting, which means going according to the natural cycles, the natural rhythm of the body. Then people ask, aren't coconuts and peanut too rich in fat? And coconuts and peanuts are totally different from the fat you find in oils or even in animal products, because if you boil chicken or fish or meat, you get fat on top. If you boil milk, you get fat on top. But if you boil peanuts, and in India, a lot of people eat peanuts boiled rather than roasted or fried. So if you boil peanuts, you'll never get fat on top. If you boil a piece of coconut, you won't get fat on top. And that's because coconut and peanuts and everything else that every other plant that has a lot of fat also has a lot of fiber, and the fiber holds on to the fat. And if we eat fat with fiber, first of all, you can't eat too much because it fills you up. And secondly, the fiber holds on to the fat, so it doesn't allow the fat to go straight into the bloodstream. And so it's much less likely to cause disease. So if you think about peanuts, peanuts are also called monkey nuts. And that's because monkeys love peanuts. And monkeys can easily open them and eat them. And I'm aware that even in America, you don't even get peanuts whole, right? You get them shelled most of the time. But we often get the peanuts whole, especially in the season. And we love to get whole peanuts and then boil them whole and then take out the seeds, just like you'd boil peas and eat them. And, even many of us sprout peanuts. And when you sprout peanuts, they taste sweet and delicious as well. So, but they're totally different from other things which are not rich in fiber, mainly animal products, where the fat is just free fat. And so we don't put a big restriction on coconut and peanuts, so it gives the flavor that you would get out of oil. Of course, you shouldn't eat too much of it either. But some people think that coconuts are rich in cholesterol. And I want to just say that cholesterol is a sterol. It's only produced by animals. There's no cholesterol in coconuts or peanuts or any other plant food at all. And I just threw in this one question, which hasn't got to do with nutrition, but are hand sanitizers helpful? And the answer is yes, because they kill bacteria and virus, but not in the high quantities that they've been used recently, because I've seen patients use so much hand sanitizer that they get eczema, because after all, hand sanitizers are chemicals, right? And so if you use too much of a chemical, it's not going to be good for us, because anything that we put on our skin gets absorbed into our body and affects us and has to be broken down by the liver and excreted by the kidneys, and it's a load on the body. So all these questions, just to say that if we have a question, the answer is also likely to be within us. That means, just like all the animals in nature instinctively know what to do and how to live, so do we instinctively know. It's just that we're not in touch with our instincts. And so, for anyone who's interested in this, it would be really nice to just spend a vacation on an organic farm. Like, when I did the internship in Farm Sanctuary, I learned so much about animals that I had never known before, just by observing them. Because we're so cut off from nature that we don't know all these things. Similarly, if you live on a farm, then you really connect to nature and understand what to eat and what not to eat. And so it's really worth doing it at some time in your life, just to learn. Now, besides nutrition, there are other important things for healing that we would do if we were living in nature. And the reason I put this book is because this is from Dr. Lorraine Day. Dr. Lorraine Day got cancer, and she treated herself just with food and with mind shift by, and of course, all these different modalities. But Dr. Lorraine, what impressed me about Dr. Lorraine Day is that she said that I got breast cancer and I refused to get surgery for breast cancer because I didn't get breast cancer because I had too many breasts. And therefore, the solution to breast cancer would not be surgery. But she said that, I used the tumor to have something to watch so that I could change things in my life and see whether it was getting better or worse, so that I could track my progress. If you have surgery and remove the tumor, how do you track your progress? So Dr. Lorraine Day is an orthopedic surgeon who reversed breast cancer just naturally through nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance. Temperance means not consuming anything that's addictive, or not doing anything that's harmful to health, then fresh air, rest at the right time. There are lots of people who sleep all day and stay up all night, and that's not good. We should be in the natural cycle. And trust in nature, in God if you believe in God, but nature is God or nature. Trust in nature and your body, because your body always works to heal, but you have to get out of the way. We have to stop doing all the things that produce cancer. So the way we treat at SHARAN is a little bit different from naturopathy, because in naturopathy, there would be all kinds of procedures like, cold packs and hot packs and enemas and maybe drinking urine or other therapies. And if you think about it, this is not something that we would do naturally. So the best way to, that doesn't mean that we never, ever, ever prescribe enemas. We would if it was absolutely required. But otherwise, clean your intestines by having a lot of fiber. If you're eating whole foods, it's really hard to be constipated. Or, for example, naturopathy prescribes sun gazing, and we wouldn't prescribe that exactly, but maybe spending time out in the sun. Or naturopathy has healing with herbs and medications. And I'm not saying that any of this is bad, but we are just trying to help people listen to their own body and heal. Or naturopathy might have a fixed dietary regimen. And I would always say, listen to your body, because your body knows how to heal. For example, if you like tomatoes, or if you are drawn to grapes, that means you need the nutrients of tomatoes or grapes. So we should listen to our body, because our body can guide us in healing, because the body knows which nutrients you're missing or which nutrients you really need more of. And maybe naturopathy prescribes fasting. We don't, we say listen to your body. So our biggest motto is listen to your body. And our body naturally asks us to fast when we're unwell. So maybe you've noticed that when you have fever, your body says, I don't want to eat anything. And people around you might say, have something, just a little bit. But we shouldn't, because our body is saying, don't eat. So basically, the difference between naturopathy and SHARAN's principles are that SHARAN always recommends listening to your body, listening to nature, observing nature, and logical conclusions. Or even an exercise regimen. Rather, we would say that everyone should exercise, but do the things you really love, so it wouldn't be something very fixed. So in general, when you're treating symptoms, usually you give medications for symptoms, or like if someone has constipation and you give enema, you're treating symptoms. But instead of treating symptoms, we should remove the cause of the problem, which is what Dr. Lorraine Day was doing when she had cancer, or which is what Dr. John McDougall would do when he treated patients with cancer. Remove the cause of the problem. And that's what we do. So the body always works to heal, and we should work to understand and remove the causes. We should understand what are the causes of disease and remove them, rather than try to remove symptoms by giving medicines that remove the symptoms. Like, for example, if you have a headache and you take a painkiller, you'll get rid of the headache temporarily, but the headache will come back because you did not remove the cause of the headache. But if you were to think, hey, I've got a headache, what could be the cause of the headache? How can I make sure that I never get this headache again? Then you'll stop getting headaches, right? So that's the way we treat. So those are the principles. So what are the causes of disease? Number one is the lack of understanding. The lack of understanding nature, because we're living in a culture where we think and praise technology and medicine and science and pills and surgery rather than nature. But we should be worshipping nature, so that we understand what nature is telling us and, follow it. And that doesn't mean I'm a doctor. I really believe that medical science is something that's really amazing. And I would always go to a doctor if I had to. In fact, recently, I needed to have cataract surgery. And I was just so amazed at how simple the surgery was and how things are so great for me after that. So I really believe in all different therapies, but I would like to help people to become their own best doctors by understanding what nature meant them to do. The other causes of disease are wrong nutrition. Like, wrong nutrition is a bit like taking a car that runs on petrol and putting in diesel, right? If we are supposed to be herbivores, and that too special kind of herbivores, and we put all kinds of things and behave like an omnivore, we will get sick. And then medicines, only doctors know how many side effects medicines have and how many diseases they can cause, which doesn't mean that they're not required. In fact, I'm very slow at removing medicines when a patient is on them. I only take away medicines as patients get better and as their tests show that they're better. But I'm aware that I always look at all the medicines and take the most harmful medicines out first. And then chemicals. Chemicals are all over the place, and we'll talk more about these soon. And today we're living in an environment full of chemicals, and this causes disease, and we really need to look into that much more than we do. And then lack of exercise. Of course, everyone knows that they should be exercising in some way or another. But it could even be dancing. If you love dancing, you can get exercise through dancing. So you can play games or tennis or anything that you enjoy in order to get your exercise. And then stress is a huge cause of disease. And today people are so stressed, and we'll talk more about that as well. And lack of rest. That's another big cause, because we're so busy that we don't have time to sleep. But the body can only heal during rest. It can't heal when we're busy. And that's why when we're really sick, fasting helps such a lot, because when you're fasting, your body doesn't have to digest and eliminate, and so it can just work on healing. And so it's really important to listen to your body and fast when it tells you to. And then lack of fresh air. It happens that we're in closed rooms for long periods of time, either with air conditioning or heating. But fresh air every single day is really important. And then electromagnetic frequencies. I recently had a patient with cancer who got cancer just because there was a mobile phone tower right above her office, and people around there were also getting cancer. And so when she moved to her daughter's house, the cancer started regressing just because she had moved from one city to another, and where she was staying was too close to a mobile phone tower. And then, of course, the wrong attitude. Like, we have to have a positive attitude, don't we? So all of these things are really important. Is this all going fine right now, Chef?
Fantastic. Yeah. Taking some notes to ask a few questions.
Oh, okay. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about understanding the nutritional causes of disease. And this is something that's very simple to understand, and there are very few causes. So anyone can understand and start removing these causes. Number one cause is excess fat. Number 2 surprising cause is excess proteins. Number 3, lack of fiber, empty calories. Empty calories means just oil or sugar. This has no nutrients. They're just calories, or even white rice and white flour, and chemicals. Chemicals in our food can be in packaged food, in processed food, and even in non-organic food. So what does excess fat do? And this is excess fat can be either on the body or in the food that you're eating. Where do you get all this excess fat? From fried foods, from added oils and butter and margarine and so on, and from animal products, which are always full of fat. So foods rich in fat are all animal products, all refined plant fats. Now, this is from Forks Over Knives. So that's a movie I really recommend. Everyone should see that movie. And here you have a test tube of blood, which has been centrifuged so that you have the plasma on top and the red blood cells below. And this is, from someone who has not been eating for the last 10 hours. This is the way the blood should be taken. But if you take the blood from someone who has just eaten maybe 4 hours ago, a normal meal, like a normal means, the kind of meals people usually eat, which contains oil and fat and so on, then you would see the plasma looking like this. It's not transparent, it's translucent, or even kind of semi-solid. Now, if this blood is thickened with this fat, then it's going to be very hard for the blood to move all around the body, which it has to, because, every single cell in our body needs to get a blood supply constantly. And so if any of these little arteries, they're very tiny, if they get blocked with fat, then the part they're supplying to doesn't get any blood, it doesn't have a good blood supply, and so there'll be issues. And so if we have less blood supply to any part of the body, that part will cry out in pain. For example, when you have migraines, that means that you're not getting a good blood supply to the head. And many people know that you get migraines if you eat too much chocolates or cheese. Both of them are full of fat. So if you have joint pains, it could be because you're not getting enough circulation to those joints. So if we can reduce the fat, these pains will diminish. Of course, that doesn't mean that if it's rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease, then there are different things. But in general, if you just have pain somewhere, it's your body crying out because there's less circulation. For example, what is a heart attack? It's your heart muscles crying in pain because they're not getting enough blood supply. So we just have to make sure that when we have pain somewhere, we can improve the blood supply and it will get better. And that has to be done by reducing the fat and increasing the fiber. The fiber ushers out the fat. So actually, when we consume fat over a period of time, the fat thickens the blood, and this causes a tear in the artery wall, as you see in where my arrow is in this diagram. And then if you see the third diagram, over a period of time, these tears are bandaged with cholesterol, and over a period of time, you find that fat is accumulating in the arteries. And if plaque from a big artery breaks away and goes into a smaller artery can suddenly cause a blood clot. It can suddenly clog up the artery, and then the part that artery is supplying to doesn't receive any blood supply. This causes pain. So if you have back pain, it could be because you have a bad supply of blood to the back. And so we just need to improve the blood supply by reducing the fat. So I spoke about angina and stroke. Stroke is a blood clot to the brain. And this is also from Forks Over Knives. And this diagram shows that in Norway, there were very few people with circulatory diseases in 1927, when people ate much less animal products. But as time went by and people were eating more and more animal products, more and more heart disease and cardiovascular accidents were happening, until 1940, when the Nazis entered and took away all the animals that belonged to the Norwegians to feed their own troops. And then the heart attacks and everything fell in Norway amongst the Norwegian people. But then in 1945, when the World War II was over, and the Nazis left Norway, and the Norwegians got their animals back, their heart attacks started rising again. So this is a really important lesson that we have to learn. Once again, this is from Forks Over Knives, and that's such an amazing movie that everyone should watch it, because it makes you understand the real causes of disease. This is a diagram from Caldwell Esselstyn's book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And he's talking about a colleague who had a sudden heart attack. And it was such a large portion of the artery was blocked that they couldn't do a bypass surgery. And so he agreed to follow a plant-based diet. And this is the artery after 2.5 years of plant-based diet. 2.5 years of a plant-based diet. This is one of my patients many years ago, who came back after a year. He was Israeli, and he had carotid arteries blocked on both sides. And you can't operate on carotid arteries, or at least at that time you could not. And so his doctor just told him, take medicines, there's nothing you can do for it. But when I told him about plant-based diet, he and his wife had upper respiratory tract diseases and asthma. So they both went on a plant-based diet and also learned to cook really amazing Israeli food, totally whole and plant-based. And he came back after a year, and his doctors told him that the carotid arteries had opened up, and they were really surprised because this rarely happens. So that was just by changing his diet. And this is a video, but I won't play the video just in the interest of time. Diabetes also is caused by fat, once again, inside the muscle cell. So when fat builds up inside the muscle cell, it causes insulin resistance, which is the cause of diabetes or type 2 diabetes. And here's a diagram which shows the increase in the incidence of breast cancer with increased intake of animal fats. So the countries that consume less animal fats or less animal products, people are less likely to get breast cancer than the more affluent countries that consume a lot of meat, and breast cancer is much more common in these countries. So fat and obesity is the root cause of many, many, many diseases. The next one is protein. Excess protein actually causes disease. And, no animal products contain fiber. And so you don't have the protective fiber in animal proteins that prevents you from eating too much. So anyone would have noticed that, they may have eaten too much chicken or too much turkey or too much meat or even too much cheese or eggs. But nobody says, hey, today I ate too much lentils, right? And that's because lentils contain fiber, so you can't overeat, just like you can't overeat brown rice. And so it's really important that we eat foods full of fiber. Now, there are many diseases linked to excess protein consumption. Osteoporosis and kidney disease and gout, everyone knows that. Acidity and cancer. Protein is the food for growth. Cancer is a growth. And allergies and autoimmune diseases. And we'll be talking about some of these things in the episodes that we'll have in the future, how excess protein actually causes osteoporosis. But if you'd like to learn more about any of these things, we already have some of these talks up on our YouTube channel on SHARAN. And then diseases linked to lack of fiber. Constipation is the biggest problem that you have when you don't have enough fiber. And constipation is the mother of so many diseases. So if we can just avoid constipation by having plenty of fiber and no medicines, then, no medicines for constipation, then this would really, really be a sign that we're eating well. And empty calories, of course, cause so many obesity and so many diseases. And chemicals, and packaged food contains chemicals, or non-organic food contains chemicals, but chemicals come from other sources as well. For example, personal care products. Many of us don't think about all the chemicals we're putting in our mouth every day when we use that toothpaste. Or many of us, or the mouthwash, or even the things that we're putting on our bodies, like the lotions. Have you ever seen the list of ingredients in lotions? Most of the ingredients are things that you can't even pronounce. And so I always say that don't put anything on your body that you wouldn't dare to put in your mouth. And so it would be much better to use almond oil or apricot oil or something that you would dare to put in your mouth rather than lotion to moisturize your body. And similarly, it would be better to use more natural shampoos and soaps. And nowadays you get a lot more natural ingredients, natural body care products that are not made with toxic ingredients. And then home care products, all these things that we're breathing, like the window cleaners and toilet cleaners and all those strong smells, chlorine and Clorox, and these are really dangerous for health as well. And then we shouldn't forget that medicines are chemicals. And so all these chemicals that we are using and consuming have to be broken down by the liver and can cause liver complaints. They have to be broken down by the kidneys and can cause kidney disease. Chemicals are hormone disruptors. And so today we have so many hormonal problems like hypothyroidism and PCOD and diabetes. Insulin is a hormone, and infertility and menopausal problems and so on and so forth. And then cancers. Actually, breast cancer and prostate cancer and ovarian cancer are also hormone-dependent cancers. And chemicals are also carcinogens. And so these chemicals are all the things that we should reduce and minimize to the extent possible. We already talked about these two important supplements, vitamin B12 and vitamin D. And we'll talk more about them in another episode. But here I want to say that mind and body are connected. We will be talking more about this in the episode on cancer, but mind and body are so intricately connected. And so we often get diseases of the body when we have issues in the mind, like resentment and anger and stress and so on. And that's why Dr. Lorraine Day didn't just work on her nutrition, but worked on different things to get rid of her cancer. But of course, her nutrition was completely plant-based and raw, a lot of raw, not completely raw, but a lot of raw. So why are we so stressed today? One is because we feel that we have to live up to expectations of society, and we may not be able to meet them. There's a lot of loneliness. We are forcing ourselves to do things against our basic nature. Like maybe, many people have jobs. We're lucky that we have jobs that we really love. But many people have jobs that they don't love, and they're working just because they need to earn a living. And so this causes stress, and we're creating the energy of fear and violence around us instead of peace. And this last one is something that I'd like to explain a little more. So imagine if there's a room where someone is really angry and sitting there and upset. And if you walk into that room, would you feel that? What do you say, Chef AJ? Would you feel that?
Absolutely. Yeah, energy, you can feel other people's happiness,
Absolutely.
joy.
Yes. And imagine that the whole earth is our room. It's our only home. And there's so many living people and animals who are suffering from separation, from violence, from fear, from starvation, all kinds of sufferings. And this is especially true for the animals that we enslave for our consumption and for other entertainment and so on. And, about 10 times our human population is the population of animals slaughtered for food every year. So, for example, if we are 8 billion on the planet, the number of animals slaughtered for food is probably around 80 billion. 80 billion land animals, not even sea animals. So all these animals are suffering separation, violence, fear, and we're in the same room, which is the planet, as them, and we're getting their energy. Now, there are other ways that we get their energy as well. For example, I noticed that when I stopped eating animal products, and I was vegetarian, so it was only dairy and eggs for me. But when I stopped eating animal products, I found a huge shift in my state of mind. I found more calmness, more strength, more grounded feeling, less insecurity, less fearfulness. And I recognized that fear and that insecurity was coming from animals that I was, whose fluids I was consuming, milk. And as a scientist, I know that when we are stressed, we produce adrenaline. When they are stressed, they produce adrenaline. And when we consume animal products, we are consuming their adrenaline and their stress and their fear and their suffering. And that's why there's so much stress in the world. So that's another reason why I always advocate for plant-based diet. Nowadays, we're treating so many people with depression and anxiety that I haven't even talked about, but we will be talking about that in one of our episodes later. So Now I just want to share how we recommend meal planning. It's very simplistic the way I'm going to share it, but wake up and rehydrate yourself. So this should be not tea or coffee, but rather just something that's alkaline. It could be water with a little lemon juice, or it could be water with citrus slices in it, in the jug, or whatever, just, or some kind of infusion or herbal infusion, or it could be just plain water. And then I always recommend breakfast as green smoothie and fruit. Why green smoothie and why fruit? Imagine if you were living on a farm, the very first thing you would pick would be fruit, right? I mean, fruits are always more attractive than vegetables if we're going to eat something completely raw. So we should start the day with the best food in the world for human beings, and that's fruit. But we should also start the day with a lot of nutrients. And greens contain a lot of nutrients. So, but the greens contain nutrients which are packed in cellulose. And if you don't break open all that cellulose, you don't get all the nutrients. And so, if we could have green smoothies, and you'll see a recipe for green smoothie, our green smoothie, in the next episode, just a basic green smoothie, which is green leaves and bananas and other fruit. And so this gives you lots of nutrients to start the day with. I myself have only 2 glasses of green smoothie in the morning. And I've noticed that if you have a green smoothie as compared to a fruit smoothie, you're much more full for much longer. And that's just because of the nutrients. And then in case you need a snack, it could be anything that's whole and plant-based. It could be a muesli bar, or it could be muesli with plant-based milk. Especially, I mean, if you're having muesli, it's important to check the ingredients. But I always encourage people to make their own because it's really simple to make. It could also be a porridge, like an oat porridge, or and if you're having oat porridge, we have a fabulous recipe on our website. You can see our website on every slide, which is whole and plant-based and creamy and delicious. Or it could be like a whole grain or rye bread with some nut spread, or anything simple like that. Personally, I never have a snack because my green smoothie is so filling and so delicious. And then I'm too busy working, so I don't even think of a snack. And so lunch. Lunch should be ideally a big salad, or at least 1/4 of the meal should be raw. And then, if you like, no more than 1/4 should be grain, and the rest beans and vegetables, or just vegetables, or just beans, but no more than 1/4 grain and no less than 1/4 raw, so that we have some raw in every single meal, so that slowly we'll get closer to what we were really meant to eat. And then in the evening, if you like a snack, it could be just fruit, or it could be, if you want something savory, it could be maybe a rice cake with hummus, or a rice cake with a nut butter or a peanut butter or something like that. And then dinner could be something similar to lunch. Now, when I say this, like, for example, a dinner could even be baked falafel in a pita pocket with lots of salad and tahini, and maybe some roasted vegetables as well. So this would also follow the same pattern of having some raw, a little grain, and lots of beans and vegetables in every meal. right? So you can make many combinations of this, or it could just be a complete meal salad or a Buddha bowl or something where you have all these ingredients, or some or all of these ingredients, but not too much grain and not an absence of raw. And it would be wise to make sure that, so we talked about raw foods, that at least 1/4 of your daily food should be raw. It would be good to cover all the colors of the rainbow every day. And that's really easy if you start the day with smoothie, because you've already covered green, yellow, and one other fruit. Say if you put in strawberries or blueberries, then you have 3 colors already. But if we could have all the colors of the rainbow every day, then we'd be having all the phytonutrients, or most of the phytonutrients, every single day. Then we should remember the nut limit, and we should remember that even if we're not using nuts, if we're using nut butter or nut milk, we might be using nuts without knowing that we're using nuts. So we have to be careful of that. And it's always good to have a few condiments, because it makes the food so much more delicious. Like if you have a nice dressing on your salad, or like steamed vegetables with like a peanut satay sauce or something like that, condiments. And we also encourage a few desserts, because if you make healthy desserts, then you won't be having unhealthy sweets. And I always encourage people to learn something new every so often. It could be once a week a new recipe, or once a month a new recipe, or whatever. And one way to do that is to, get your organic food in baskets, so that you get some new things every time that you have to look up recipes for. Okay, so now we're going to talk about stages of healthy eating. Like when you transition from a regular diet to a whole food plant-based diet, that's just stage 1 of healthy eating. But if you include more raw, then your body will invite you to have more raw, more highly nutritious food, and grains will slowly get reduce, because the raw foods are so vibrant that after a while you don't feel like eating too much grain. Grain is a filler, but it's not something that's that delicious. And then the third stage would be 100% raw. And sometimes when we have really serious diseases like cancers, or largely for cancers, but sometimes for something that requires urgent help, I often ask patients to be mostly raw. So that's the third stage that's getting better and better. And truly, we are fruitarians, because if we were eating only fruit, we wouldn't be killing any plant at all. And we would be helping the plants, because we're spreading their seeds. And that's what nature had actually meant for us, to be completely fruitarian. But all of these stages are kind of spiritual changes as well. And so it may not be possible to be all the way here in this lifetime. It's better to do something sustainable. Even if you do whole plant-based all the time with 25% raw, you'll get rid of a lot of diseases and stay really healthy. And then the last but not least is living on light. And there are a few people who live on, or are breatharians, or just live on light, and they have a lot of energy. And the reason they have a lot of energy is because they're not spending any energy on digestion. But of course, this is a very highly evolved stage, and we should at least aim for stage 1 of health. So in summary, health is our birthright. And it is our duty to eat and live as close to that which nature intended, so that we will be reversing diseases or preventing diseases. Prevention is better than cure. Our body always works to heal. Like, for example, if you get a fracture, no doctor in the world can heal a fracture, but your body can. If you get an injury, all the doctor can do is, put the part together or stitch it or put a bandage on it, but really it's your body that heals. So our body is always working to heal, and all we have to do is get rid of the causes of that disease, understand and remove the cause. And we treat with a whole plant-based diet as the first stage of transition, right? So we don't tell everyone to be off grains, not even off wheat or gluten if it doesn't bother them. Just a whole plant-based diet as the first stage, and a lot of healing happens just with that. I just want to end with different things that SHARAN offers. We have a website with a lot of information. So if what I've been saying is of interest to you, do go on our website. We have a whole page on vitamin B12 and vitamin D and an FAQ section. And then we have 600 recipes, and a lot of them are Indian recipes, so they may be of interest. And then we have a YouTube channel, and there we have a lot of talks like these. And we have some publications, even some publications for free download. We have a recipe book for free download. And we also have a SHARAN Healthy Living, which has the basic principles of healthy living for free download on our website. And then we have lots of talks and classes, some on Zoom and some live. And we love to have the live ones because we always serve food. And that's what really motivates people. And we have consultations. We have a team of doctors and nutritionists. And we have retreats. We have a 21-day retreat. We have 7-day retreats. So that, the retreats are really good because the people who join us for our retreats live with us, and they actually experience the benefits. And once you've experienced the benefits for a certain length of time without going off track, you automatically want to stay on track. And then we also have cooking classes every day during our retreats so that people learn a lot. And we also have every year training programs for doctors to practice plant-based nutrition, nutritionists and dietitians and facilitators to do talks as well as cooking classes and to plan all of these. So these are some images of our 21-day retreat, which always takes place at the same place every year. And it's just a beautiful place to reconnect with nature and animals. And this is some of the food that we have out there. And I just put some images, but really our food is spectacular, and it's all buffets so that everyone, their body is attracted to. And I just want to end with what the format will be for the Saturdays with SHARAN. We're going to have one topic each time, and there'll be one or more SHARAN facilitators who had the problem, who will be talking about their problem along with me. I'll be talking about the topic, and they will be talking about the problem and how they got better. And then they will show you a demo or two. So that's our plan. And next time we're going to have autoimmune diseases, which have become so common these days. So do join us if this interests you. So that's it from me, Chef AJ.
Thank you so much. Of all the things you said, I think my favorite was your body knows how to heal.
Yeah.
True.
I really believe that.
Yeah. You one of the things you said, and I'm not, and I welcome varying opinions on this show, and I never want to pit one doctor against each other, but you said we're meant to be fruitarians. And I know that a lot of the raw doctors I've had on the show, like Dr. Doug Graham, agrees, but then we have other doctors like Dr. McDougall's that say, no, we're starchivores. So what do you think about that?
I think that each one of us doctors is saying almost the same thing. 95% of what we say is the same. And there are differences because of different experiences. Like my experience or Dr. John McDougall's experience is actually 95% the same, but then there's a 5% difference amongst all of us. And that's the beauty of variety, isn't it?
Yep.
Every
Absolutely.
patient has to choose the one they like the most.
Absolutely.
I agree with you that everyone is good and everyone's doing amazing work. And so I wouldn't want to pit one against the other. I was just trying to explain SHARAN's principles.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, one of the things you said that I think everyone I've had on the show agrees is about this night eating. And that is just so prevalent, at least in the United States. People, well, what snack can I have while watching TV? Well, none. I mean, this eating after dinner, I see that is one of the main reasons I see so many people struggle with their weight is that they eat dinner and then they keep eating and eating and then they go to bed and they have digestive problems and sleep problems. If people would just do that, even on any diet, I think they would start to feel better.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to eat mindfully, but it's important to eat food that's not addictive.
Yes.
So raw food is rarely addictive. Cooked food,
unless you're putting sugar, oil, and salt on it. I mean, you can't just eat salad until you burst.
Yeah. And even if you put I've never heard someone say that I ate too much salad today, even if they put a decent dressing on it. I'm not saying the oily dressings, oil is addictive, but if you're eating whole and plant-based, then it's less likely. No one can overeat fruit, right?
You really can. It's mostly water and it goes right through you. Like you said, eat like a gorilla. I was thinking the last thing I ate was 2 bananas. So I guess I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so if we can just learn to listen to our body. So I always tell people, don't start eating till you're really hungry. Don't just eat because it's meal time. Eat mindfully. So yeah, and watching TV or doing something and eating is the worst way to eat, because then you're not mindful at all. Your mind is on something else altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I look forward to the future episodes and meeting some of the people that have had success working with you and seeing some of the wonderful recipes.
Thank you. I look forward to being with you again too.
Yeah, well, you're just a delight. Thank you. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow for another fabulous debut show. Chef Kelly Williamson is the plant-based kitchenista, and she is going to be making a Mexican fiesta. Take care, everyone.